Hello and welcome. I'm thrilled that you've joined me today as we journey back to one of the most fascinating and often misunderstood periods in history, Regency England. Now let me ask you, when you think of Regency courtship, what comes to mind? Perhaps you imagine grand balls resplendent in their elegant charm, with ladies in long flowing gowns and gentlemen in finely cut coats exchanging knowing glances and polite conversation under chandeliers glittering in the dim light. Or maybe your thoughts turn to those famous scenes from Jane Austen novels like Pride and Prejudice, where Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet have a dance in the middle of a grand ballroom filled with tension, witty exchanges, and unspoken feelings. I'm willing to bet that when we think about this period, romance is the first thing that comes to mind. And it makes sense. After all, how could we not picture sweeping love stories against a backdrop of elegant courtships and polite, flirtatious banter? But what if I told you that the reality of courtship in Regency England was far more complicated than the romance-filled scenes we see in films and read about in books? Yes, courtship in Regency England, though undoubtedly filled with elegance, was not the free-flowing, spontaneous romance we might imagine. In fact, it was a highly regulated and structured process, one where the rules of family reputation and social status often took precedence over love itself. So let's take a step back for a moment. Imagine that you are a young woman living in Regency England, preparing to enter the world of courtship. You've grown up in a world where your every movement is observed not just by your family but by society at large. You are the daughter of an aristocratic family, perhaps an earl or a baron, and your family's legacy is tied to your future. You've been raised with the understanding that your life's path is not just about who you choose to love. It's about who your family deems a worthy match for you, who will protect and preserve the family's reputation and wealth. From a young age, you've been taught that your worth is tied to much more than your personality or character. Yes, those things matter, but they aren't the deciding factors. Your family's name, your dowry, and your ability to make a socially advantageous match are what matter most. The moment you come of age and step into the social scene, you realize the immense pressure that comes with your future courtship. The goal isn't necessarily to fall in love, it's to secure your family's legacy and uphold its honor. And this brings with it an entire set of expectations, rules, and quite frankly restrictions that can make the idea of romance feel like a distant dream. But here's where it gets interesting. What about love? Does it have any place in this world of carefully curated connections and strategic marriages? The answer, though surprising, is yes, but it's often more hidden, more subtle, and certainly more controlled than we'd expect. In the midst of all the societal pressures, the rigid courtship rituals, and the high-stakes love does manage to break through. And it does so in the most unexpected ways, through quiet gestures, fleeting glances, and sometimes beneath the surface of formal interactions that seem almost too controlled to allow for genuine connection. Now let's think about it from the perspective of a young man. You are an eligible bachelor raised in a similar world where your value is also determined by your family name, your wealth, and your ability to provide for your future wife. Courtship isn't about spontaneous passion. It's about proving your worth not only to the woman you wish to court, but to her family and to society at large. You know that your place in this world depends on your family's reputation, on whether you've inherited enough property, whether you've made the right connections, and whether you've proven yourself to be a worthy suitor for someone of her standing. Just like the young women, the young men of Regency England are caught in a dance, a carefully orchestrated performance where every word, every gesture, and every glance has meaning. It's not enough to be charming, wealthy, or kind. You have to prove to the young woman's family that you are capable of securing her future, that you are worthy of her. Love in this world takes a back seat to practicality. Your pursuit of her hand is not about passion and affection alone. It's about securing a position in society, ensuring that you will be a good provider, and showing that you will uphold her family's reputation as much as your own. So what's really going on in this world of regulated courtship? Is there space for true love to develop, or is it a world where duty and reputation overshadow the desires of the heart? And where does all of this take place? The answer might surprise you. Courtship in Regency England wasn't the private affair we might think it was. No, it took place in public spaces, at balls, social gatherings, promenades, and dinners, where every step, every word, and every move was carefully observed, not just by the two people involved, but by everyone around them. These public spaces weren't just places for fun, they were the very venues where courtship happened, and they were meticulously planned to ensure that everything happened according to the rules. Let's talk about those rules for a moment. In Regency England, courtship wasn't a casual affair. It was a performance, an intricate dance between two families, not just two individuals. Your every movement was under the scrutiny of your family, your suitor's family, and society at large. What you said, how you said it, how you danced each moment was part of the performance. And while we might think of the ball as a fun event, a chance to dress up and enjoy the music, it was also a place where potential suitors were examined, judged, and considered. The stakes were high because for the young women, the ball wasn't just about finding a partner for a waltz. It was about finding a partner for life and about making sure that match was the right one for your family. Imagine for a moment that you are a young woman entering a ball. The grand ballroom is alive with chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the sound of violins. The lights of the chandeliers sparkle like stars, and the room is filled with eligible bachelors, each vying for your attention. But unlike what you may see in modern-day films, this is no ordinary social event. This is your chance to secure your future and your reputation. You know that every suitor who approaches you, every polite bow, every dance request is not just about the joy of dancing, it's about the opportunity to assess whether this person is worthy of you and whether you, in turn, are worthy of him. You have one chance to make a good impression. After all, your family's future depends on it. But even with the pressure, there's still that spark. Perhaps amidst the formality of the waltz or the quiet conversation on a promenade, you feel something deeper. A brief glance, a shared laugh, small moments that hint at something more than just social protocol. For a brief second, you wonder, could this really be love? It's these fleeting moments, these tiny gestures that offer a glimpse of what could be. Even in a world where courtship was meticulously controlled and highly public, love still had a way of creeping in. And despite the structured world of Regency England, it was possible, just possible, that love could bloom in the most unexpected ways. That's what we're going to explore in this journey, how courtship, under all its rules and regulations, was still a human experience. How despite the pressures of family reputation and societal expectations, love managed to find its way. We'll explore how love wasn't just about private moments, but was often played out in full view of society at balls, promenades, and dinner parties. It was a world of subtlety where everything from the way you danced to the words you chose to speak carried meaning. It was a world where families had just as much say in your future as you did. Now let me ask you, what do you think about all of this? What would it be like to live in a world where your family's approval, your social standing, and your reputation weighed so heavily on every move you made? And how does love fit into all of this? That's exactly what we're going to discover as we peel back the layers of Regency courtship, one intricate detail at a time. So grab your favorite cup of tea and settle in. This is going to be a fascinating ride through the past, where love, society, and reputation collided in the most unexpected ways. As we step back into the world of Regency England, I want you to imagine the bustling streets of London in the early 19th century, the sounds of carriages clattering over cobblestone streets, the chatter of merchants, and the elegance of the aristocracy gliding through the squares. The air is alive with anticipation, both in terms of social events and the tension of a rapidly changing world. The social structure of Regency society was deeply stratified, and no one understood that better than the young men and women stepping into the world of courtship. For them, this wasn't just about meeting someone special, it was about securing their future, upholding their family's name, and making sure their place in society remained intact. Picture yourself as a young woman raised in a noble household, perhaps as the daughter of an earl or a baroness. From an early age, you were trained to understand that your future was not just about your personal desires, but about carrying your family's name and continuing its legacy. The rules of Regency courtship weren't just about finding love. They were about finding a match that aligned with your family's needs, securing alliances that could strengthen your family's position, and above all, safeguarding your reputation. Imagine the weight of that expectation as you come of age, knowing that your choice of partner would not just affect your future, but the future of your family. Your parents, probably your father, the head of the household, would have the final say in the matter. Sure, you'd have your own hopes and dreams, but those were secondary to the strategy your family had devised for you. You see, in Regency England, your marriage wasn't just about your own happiness. It was about securing a match that would maintain or elevate your family's social standing, and this wasn't something done in the privacy of your heart. Your every interaction, every moment of courtship was done under the public eye, attended by your family, your friends, and most importantly, your chaperone, who ensured that everything stayed within the boundaries of propriety. The focus then, in a world where social class was everything, was never just on the individuals involved in a marriage. It was about family alliances, securing financial stability, and preserving the family's legacy. If you were a young woman in the upper echelons of society, your role in courtship was to find a suitor who matched your family's expectations, one who was not only wealthy, but had a good name, one who came from a family with as much social standing as your own. Your personal happiness. That was a secondary consideration. This world of duty, social propriety, and family legacy was not just limited to young women. The young men who came to court them faced their own set of pressures. Imagine you are a young man of noble birth preparing to enter the world of courtship. Your future wife is not just someone you choose based on love or compatibility. You have to prove yourself worthy of her, not just by your charm or intelligence, but by your family's wealth, your own social position, and your ability to provide for her. Love, while desirable, was not the primary motivation. What mattered more was whether you had enough wealth, a good family name, and an ability to uphold your family's legacy. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's dive deeper into the structure of this society, because it wasn't just the aristocrats who were deeply entrenched in the courtship game, it was everyone. Regency society was built on a rigid class system, and that system dictated not only where you lived, what you did, and how you were educated, but also whom you could marry. There were distinct lines between the aristocracy, the gentry, and the middle class, and the way courtship unfolded in each class was influenced by those lines. The aristocracy at the very top of the social ladder was composed of noble families who owned vast estates, held titles, and maintained strong political and social connections. Courtship for these families wasn't just a personal matter, it was a public and strategic decision. Marriages among the aristocracy were often made not for love, but for alliances. A young woman from an aristocratic family would not marry for affection alone. Her family would seek someone with wealth status, and perhaps the political connections needed to preserve or expand their power. A marriage between aristocratic families was a way to solidify alliances, to create networks of influence that would benefit both families. The lady might have no personal desire to marry the suitor her family had chosen, but she would have little say in the matter. Think of it this way: the young woman's marriage was as much about ensuring her family's legacy as it was about securing her future. Her status as a lady of the aristocracy was intrinsically tied to whom she married. And if she married someone of lower rank or questionable reputation, her family's status could be threatened. The aristocracy's courtship was thus a careful negotiation, one conducted on a public stage where every word, every gesture was meant to communicate social propriety and family strategy. For young men in the aristocracy, the pressure was no less. They were expected to prove their worth to their potential bride's family, but they also had to uphold their own family's name and wealth. It wasn't enough to be charming or intelligent. You had to demonstrate that you had the financial means to take care of a family, that you could maintain or improve your family's standing, and that your name was clean and respected in the eyes of society. Your reputation, too, was at stake in the courtship process. One misstep could ruin your chances, not just with the lady, but with the entire social order. But not everyone lived in such an elevated world. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, a new middle class began to emerge: wealthy merchants, landowners, and professionals who didn't come from noble bloodlines but had acquired their wealth through business, trade, or industry. For these families, the rules of courtship were slightly more flexible, but the pressures were still immense. Marrying someone who came from a family of equal standing was still of great importance. If you were a young woman in the middle class, the rules weren't too different from those in the aristocracy. You had to find someone who could provide for you, and someone who had enough wealth, social standing, and respectability. However, what set the middle class apart was that love, yes, love, was sometimes seen as a more viable reason to marry. While family alliances and financial stability were still the primary motivations for marriage, the middle class did allow for a bit more personal choice in romantic relationships. A young woman might marry a suitor because they shared interests, because they had formed a bond over time, or because they admired each other's character. Still, though, the pressures of family expectations, social standing, and the desire to marry within one's class remained strong. Then, of course, there was the working class, a group often left out of the historical romantic narratives, but one that formed the backbone of Regency England's economy. For those in the working class, courtship was far more about practicality. A young woman in the working class didn't have the luxury of relying on a dowry or a title. She married to secure her future just like anyone else, but the stakes were often simpler: finding a partner who could help share the burdens of daily life, build a family, and survive. the idea of marrying for status or wealth was not the same in this class. A young woman's focus wasn't on impressing her family or maintaining a lineage, it was on finding someone to support her and with whom she could build a life. But even in the working class, reputation played a significant role. Even though these families didn't have large estates or vast wealth, they were still concerned with their status in their community. A working-class woman who engaged in a relationship with someone of poor reputation could face social ostracism just like her noble counterparts. Courtship, while more relaxed in some respects, was still shaped by societal expectations. Through all these classes, one thing remained constant: reputation. Whether you were an aristocrat, a member of the growing middle class, or part of the working class, reputation was everything. It dictated your prospects, it defined who you could marry, and it shaped how society viewed you. For women, reputation was particularly crucial. One misstep could ruin your chances for a good match and damage your family's standing. For men, while reputation wasn't as rigidly tied to personal conduct, it was still a determining factor in securing a good marriage and maintaining their social status. This brings us to the broader framework of Regency courtship. It wasn't simply about two people coming together for love. It was a transaction, a negotiation between families designed to secure wealth status and social connections. Love was often a luxury, something that could develop after the practicalities were settled. But despite the rules, despite the structure, and despite the restrictions, love still managed to find its way into the hearts of many. And that's what makes this period so fascinating: the dance between love and duty, between personal desire and societal expectation. As we move forward, we'll begin to explore the more personal aspects of courtship, the spaces where young men and women could interact more intimately, the rules and rituals that governed these interactions, and how love managed to emerge in the most unexpected places. But for now, let's reflect on this. In a world where marriages were as much about family as they were about individuals, love still had a way of finding its place. As we step deeper into the world of Regency courtship, we begin to see that this world is not just about two people meeting, interacting, and deciding to marry based on personal feelings. Courtship in Regency England was a family affair, a highly formalized and public event where the opinions, decisions, and expectations of family members, often spanning multiple generations, played a crucial role. In a world so rigidly defined by social hierarchy and reputation, personal choices were often secondary to family obligations. Love, as we often romanticize it, was not always the driving force behind a marriage. It was a carefully orchestrated process, and at the heart of it all was family involvement. Imagine this: you are a young woman preparing for your first public appearance in the world of Regency courtship. You have spent your life under the watchful eyes of your family, your parents, your relatives, your chaperones. Every interaction, every word spoken, and every gesture you make is closely observed, measured, and scrutinized. You are in essence a vessel through which your family's reputation and legacy are carried forward. Your value in society is not just tied to your personal character or beauty, but to the alliances you can secure, the family you marry into, and the wealth and status you bring with you. Your parents, particularly your father, have the final say in your marriage prospects. Your mother might have influence, of course, and your siblings may offer their opinions, but it is your father who ultimately decides who is worthy of your hand. And unlike what we might imagine today, where a young couple might secretly fall in love and make plans to marry on their own terms, your future as a young woman in Regency England was not something you could easily determine for yourself. Your family would meticulously evaluate every suitor, taking into account not only his character, but his wealth, social standing, and connections. Would this match elevate your family's social status? Would it secure the family's legacy, protect its wealth, or extend its influence? These were the questions that would define who you were allowed to marry. Now let's consider what this means for the young men in the world of Regency courtship. Their role wasn't simply about seeking out a woman who caught their eye. No, just like the young women, their actions were dictated by the same powerful societal forces. As a young man, your courtship wasn't just about finding someone to love, it was about proving yourself to be a suitable match. Your family's name and fortune mattered just as much as your personal charm and character. To enter the world of courtship meant proving to a young lady's family that you could provide for her future, that you had the wealth and status to support her in a life that matched the expectations of her family. Like the young women, your reputation was your most valuable asset, and you were expected to protect it carefully. Courtship for both men and women was thus a carefully controlled event. It wasn't simply about personal desire or emotional connection. It was about family approval, social standing, and the preservation of reputations. Families had to approve of the match, and if they didn't, the courtship could be called off before it even began. In the case of women, they often had no choice in the matter. A suitor's family name, his wealth and his reputation were more important than anything else. Your feelings were secondary to the societal and family obligations that you were born into. But while family involvement in courtship was essential, there was one other critical figure in the process: the chaperone. Ah yes, the chaperone, the ever-present figure who, though rarely in the spotlight, played an essential role in keeping the young women safe from societal and familial scandal. The chaperone was typically a trusted older relative, often a spinster aunt, a married relative, or even a family friend whose duty was to keep a watchful eye over the young woman during courtship. She was there to ensure that nothing improper occurred. And in a society where reputation was everything, the presence of a chaperone was not just a formality, it was a necessity. Imagine for a moment that you are a young woman newly introduced into the world of courtship, and you are at a ball meeting potential suitors for the first time. As you stand in the ballroom, your chaperone is nearby, though not in an obvious way. She's close enough to observe, but far enough away to allow you a sense of privacy. The chaperone's role isn't simply to make sure that you behave properly, it is also to make sure that your suitor behaves properly. You can't be left alone with him even for a moment. Anytime the two of you share a dance, a conversation, or even a simple walk, your chaperone is there keeping a safe distance, ensuring that nothing inappropriate occurs. The chaperone is both protector and enforcer. She ensures that the rules of courtship are adhered to and that no advances go further than what is deemed acceptable by the standards of society. But the chaperone's duties didn't end at the ball. She was a constant presence in every aspect of a young woman's courtship. Whether you were out on a promenade in the park, sitting together at a formal dinner, or even having a quiet conversation in the drawing room, the chaperone was always watching, making sure the interaction stayed within the boundaries of propriety. And while that might sound stifling, it was in fact an essential part of the courtship process. The chaperone ensured that no young man could make an inappropriate advance or speak to a young woman in a way that would tarnish her reputation. After all, it wasn't just about whether you liked someone, it was about ensuring that the family's social position was protected and that the young woman's reputation remained untarnished. But while the chaperone's presence may have felt like a restriction, it also offered a certain sense of protection. For the young men too, the chaperone's presence was a reminder that the courtship was being observed, that any misstep could result in social ruin. A young man couldn't just approach a woman and speak freely. He had to be careful, measured, and respectful. He had to be aware of his position in society and of the delicate social rules that governed his every action. The chaperone in many ways served as a buffer, allowing for just enough interaction without overstepping any boundaries. She was there to ensure that both families remained at ease and that the courtship process remained respectful and proper. And yet, despite all these formalities, there was still a human element to the process. Even with the chaperone's ever-watchful eye, the young men and women involved in courtship were not mere puppets being controlled by their families. There were moments, fleeting perhaps, but there were still moments of connection, of genuine affection, and even of love. Though the formalities of Regency courtship might seem restrictive to us today, there were still small acts of rebellion within it, small gestures that spoke volumes about the real human emotions underneath the surface. A stolen glance across the ballroom, a whispered word during a dance, a shared smile during a conversation, these were the small moments that gave courtship its heart. But make no mistake, this was still a society that valued rules above all else. Family involvement and the role of the chaperone were not just mere formalities, they were the backbone of the entire courtship system. The chaperone ensured that every interaction remained above reproach, that no advances were made that could damage the reputations of the families involved. And for the young men and women navigating this world, the chaperone's presence was as much a part of courtship as the dance itself. For the young men, the chaperone was a constant reminder of the delicate dance they were performing. They had to be careful not to appear too eager, too forward, or too desperate. They had to be measured, polite, and respectful, not just to the young lady, but to the chaperone as well. For the young women, the chaperone's role was equally crucial. She wasn't just an observer, she was a protector, someone who ensured that no inappropriate behavior took place and that the young lady's reputation remained untarnished. In a world where reputation was everything, the role of the chaperone was essential. She was the guardian of social propriety, the the one who ensured that everything remained within the carefully constructed boundaries of Regency courtship. And yet, even within these boundaries, love found a way to emerge. Love was always present in the subtext, the glances, the letters, the small moments that spoke louder than the formalities. And despite the rigid structure of courtship in Regency England, it was in these subtle moments that love could break free. As we venture deeper into the world of Regency courtship, we begin to see the grand stages where this delicate dance took place. The ballrooms, the gardens, and the dinner tables weren't just places for socializing or entertainment. They were the arenas where the rituals of courtship unfolded, meticulously regulated by rules and expectations. These were the venues where love could blossom, or just as easily wither depending on the social dynamics at play. And these events, often grand and extravagant, were carefully designed to offer opportunities for young men and women to interact, to exchange glances, and to form connections, all while being under the watchful eye of their families and society. The grand ball was the ultimate stage for courtship. Picture yourself as a young woman entering a ballroom filled with opulence and charm. The air is thick with excitement. The soft sounds of string quartets echo in the background, mingling with the rustling of satin gowns and the soft, polite chatter of eligible young men and women. The chandeliers overhead cast a warm, inviting glow, illuminating the polished floors where couples will soon glide through the most graceful of dances. You've been preparing for this moment for months. The right gown, the perfect hairstyle, the proper etiquette to make a lasting impression. Tonight you will be seen, and this visibility is not a small thing. It's your moment to prove yourself worthy of the alliances that courtship can bring, worthy of the kind of future your family envisions for you. Your family is by your side, but it's clear that the pressure is on. Every suitor that approaches you, every gentleman who asks you for a dance is not just expressing personal interest, he is making a statement not just about himself, but about his family, his wealth, and his intentions. When a gentleman bows before you and extends his hand, it's not just an invitation to dance. It's an offering of social capital, a statement about his standing in society, his readiness to play the game of courtship, and perhaps even his desire to secure a match that will benefit both families. As a young woman in this world, every dance you have is not just an opportunity for connection, it's an opportunity to solidify your place in the social hierarchy, to potentially secure your future. But the dance is not merely about fun, it is a performance. Every step, every movement on that polished floor is scrutinized by those around you. As you dance with your suitor, your family and others in the ballroom are watching, analyzing the way you interact. Is your partner respected enough to dance with you in public? Is he charming, respectful, and dignified? Does he show promise, or does he seem out of place in such a grand setting? The dance is not just a way to get closer to a potential partner, it's a way to prove that both you and your suitor fit within the social expectations of the time. The waltz, one of the most popular dances of the period, was perhaps the most intimate and the most coveted. For the aristocracy, a waltz was not just a form of entertainment. It was a chance to see and be seen, to engage in a delicate, controlled closeness with a potential suitor. It was also a way to test the waters of a connection, to gauge whether the spark of attraction was real or simply imagined. But the waltz was also tightly bound by the expectations of society. While the dance allowed for closer proximity between partners than the traditional country dance, the physical closeness was still under careful regulation. The gentleman must maintain a respectful distance. The lady must hold herself with grace and poise. Any misstep, any hint of familiarity beyond the accepted norms could easily lead to social repercussions. As the dance finishes and the music fades, the young women are not left to wonder what happens next. The ballroom offers a brief respite, but the true nature of courtship comes to life after the music stops, and the guests begin to wander to the next venue, the promenade. In the promenade, everything slows down and the young couples are given the opportunity to converse and enjoy a bit of privacy. But let's not be fooled. While the promenade seems to offer more freedom, it too is governed by an unwritten code. This isn't a secret garden where forbidden love can flourish in secrecy. No, the promenade was a space for the public to observe potential matches, a place where the watchful eye of the family still loomed large. Chaperones may take a few steps behind, but they are still present, ensuring that the interactions between the couple stay within the bounds of propriety. Here, in the relative privacy of the gardens or the paths, the young couple may walk side by side, perhaps exchanging words, but always in the presence of the chaperone who, though not directly overseeing the conversation, is close enough to intervene if necessary. A simple stroll in the park becomes a stage for evaluation. A young man might take the lady's arm, but the chaperone is always there, ready to remind them both of the societal rules. The pace of the walk, the topics of conversation, even the small gestures exchanged between the two, everything is scrutinized. In these moments, the young couple is left to express their feelings through careful, controlled exchanges. A meaningful glance, a shared laugh, a slight brush of hands. All of these small gestures are more than just fleeting moments of affection. They are signals of deeper connection, of something that might blossom into a meaningful relationship. But even here, there are layers of expectation. A young woman is not simply expected to enjoy the walk. She must maintain her composure, stay within the boundaries of decorum, and always keep in mind that her actions reflect her family's reputation. If she appears too forward, too engaged with her suitor, the social repercussions could be disastrous. If she remains too aloof, too distant, her suitor might think she is uninterested. The dance of courtship is a delicate one, filled with nuances that, if not executed just right, could lead to misunderstandings or worse, social condemnation. As the promenade winds down, the next venue in the world of Regency courtship arrives: the dinner party. While balls and promenades are focused on physical interaction, the dinner table brings a different dynamic to the equation. It's here, in the more intimate setting of a meal, that the real test of character happens. As a young woman, the dinner party is a space for you to display not just your grace and beauty, but your intellect, your conversation, and your ability to navigate social discourse. The topics might range from the latest fashion trends to political discussions, but it is at the dinner table that you truly begin to show who you are, not just as a young woman, but as a reflection of your family's values and intellect. For the young man, the dinner party is an opportunity to prove his worth, not just through his wealth, but through his intelligence and manners. The way he interacts with the other guests, how he speaks to the lady he courts, and the way he treats her family. These are all aspects that contribute to his suitability as a suitor. A gentleman must show his politeness and his ability to engage in meaningful conversation. He can't just be charming on the dance floor, he has to be charming at the dinner table too. The ability to balance conversation, to show respect, and to demonstrate that he has the intelligence and wealth to be a worthy match is a crucial part of the courtship process. And just like the promenade or the ball, the dinner party is not just about the two people involved, it is about their families, their reputations, and their place within society. A successful dinner party courtship is one where both families come together, where alliances are forged, and where the young couple can be evaluated in a more personal, yet still public setting. There is no privacy in Regency courtship. Every interaction, every gesture, and every conversation happens within the framework of public observation. If the dinner party goes well, the suitor might be able to ask for more private moments with the young woman. But even then, there are rules to follow, boundaries to respect. Every action is measured, every gesture laden with meaning. As we reflect on these spaces, balls, promenades, and dinner parties, it becomes clear that Regency courtship was not a spontaneous affair. It was a system of highly regulated events where social status, family reputation, and public approval weighed heavily on every step. The young men and women involved were constantly aware of their roles in this performance. Every glance, every word spoken, and every step on the dance floor was an opportunity to either confirm or deny their worthiness as a match. But despite all the formality, all the constraints, there was room for something more. Love, though often hidden beneath layers of societal expectations and family pressures, found its way into these spaces. A smile shared during a dance, a fleeting touch in the garden, a compliment exchanged over dinner. All of these moments were filled with potential. And within these structured settings where everything seemed calculated, love could still blossom, though it had to navigate the delicate balance of societal expectation. So here we are, standing in the grand ballroom, the promenade, and the dinner table, all places where the game of courtship was played out. These weren't just venues for socializing. They were the stages upon which reputations were made or broken, where love was either nurtured or stifled, and where the fate of families was decided. Courtship in Regency England wasn't a private affair. It was a public spectacle performed for all to see, with every interaction and every word carrying weight. But in those moments, in the subtle exchanges and the silent gestures, love found a way to emerge, to whisper its presence, even in a world where reputation, family, and status ruled above all. By now, we've seen how courtship in Regency England unfolded within the carefully constructed boundaries of public events, the balls, the promenades, the dinner parties. But let's pause for a moment. In the midst of all these grand displays, there was something far more personal going on, something that in its own subtle way allowed for genuine affection to flourish. It was in the quiet, private exchanges that courtship sometimes revealed its truest form. No, I'm not talking about the whispered words between partners during a dance, though those moments surely mattered. I'm talking about the exchange of letters and gifts, the little tokens that allowed a suitor and his lady to communicate more directly, more intimately than any public gesture could. Think about it for a moment, the letters. How many times have you heard someone say that the written word carries weight, that a letter carefully crafted holds meaning that no spoken words could ever convey? In Regency England, this couldn't have been truer. A letter wasn't just a letter. It wasn't just ink on paper. No, it was a symbol of intention, a carefully curated message that spoke volumes about a person's feelings, desires, and perhaps most importantly, their character. Imagine you're a young woman, and after a particularly pleasant evening at a ball where you exchanged polite conversation with a suitor, you return home to find a letter waiting for you. The very thought would make your heart flutter, wouldn't it? A letter from someone who noticed you, someone who took the time to pen down their thoughts, someone who in that moment was taking a small risk in putting their feelings into words. In a world where courtship was scrutinized and where every social interaction had to be measured, a letter allowed for the kind of personal connection that public spaces simply couldn't provide. The best part, it gave you time to think, time to reflect on your own feelings. A letter didn't demand an immediate response. It was an invitation to engage, to reflect, and to move forward at your own pace. For a young woman in Regency England who was often shielded by layers of social expectations and familial oversight, receiving a letter was a rare opportunity to experience courtship on her own terms. There was something profound about reading a man's words, feeling the weight of his feelings without the ever-present eyes of a chaperone or family member watching. But of course, letters were not always just about love. In some cases, they were part of the formal process of getting to know one another, a way of formally communicating intentions and respect. For a gentleman, a letter was a way to express interest while also adhering to the social codes of conduct. A carefully worded letter might express admiration, but it also kept a respectful distance, never too forward, always measured. The way the letter was phrased, the language used, was all part of the performance. Every word had weight and every phrase carried meaning. A simple expression of affection might be concealed in formal language, giving it an air of propriety. Yet even in the most formal letters, there was space for subtlety, for a certain tenderness. Take a moment to think about the feeling of receiving such a letter. Imagine you are the young woman sitting in your sitting room, the soft light of the afternoon filtering through the curtains. You open the letter, slowly feeling the weight of the moment. It's from your suitor, and the words he has chosen, the care with which he wrote them, are a reflection of the way he feels about you. In that moment, the world outside doesn't matter. It's just you, his words, and the possibility of what might come next. This exchange, though simple, becomes something more. It's a quiet bond being formed, a connection built on trust, respect, and the willingness to expose one's heart, even if only through ink on paper. But letters weren't the only tokens of affection exchanged in courtship. Gifts, too, played an important role in conveying feelings, though not always in the way we might think. A gift was a symbol, often as much a message about wealth and status as it was about affection. And yet, despite this, gifts could carry a deep personal meaning. The right gift given at the right time could express admiration, respect, or even the beginning of love. But just as letters were highly formalized and laden with social significance, so too were gifts. The most common gifts were often small but meaningful. A piece of jewelry, perhaps a simple bracelet or a locket, could carry with it a deep significance, especially when it was given by a suitor. This wasn't just any gift, it was a statement. A locket, for example, could symbolize commitment, a promise, or a desire to keep someone close. Perhaps it contained a small portrait of the giver, a reminder of the connection between the two. In giving such a gift, the gentleman was not just offering something of value, he was offering a piece of his heart, a piece of his future. The careful selection of such a gift was not lost on the lady. She understood its significance. But not all gifts were grand or expensive. In fact, some of the most meaningful tokens were the simplest. A young man might present a young woman with a small bouquet of flowers picked fresh from the garden. These flowers, perhaps violets or roses, carried with them their own language. In Regency England, flowers had specific meanings and each one sent a message about the giver's feelings. A bouquet of violets, for example, could symbolize modesty and faithfulness, while roses represented love and desire. Such a small, seemingly innocent gift could carry layers of meaning, and the lady who received it would understand just how much thought had gone into choosing it. But just as the gifts themselves were significant, so too was the way they were given. A gift was never given casually. It was part of the ritual. The way it was presented, whether wrapped with care or offered in a simple gesture, was a reflection of the giver's character and feelings. A well-chosen gift wasn't just a token. It was an act of personal connection. It spoke of respect, of admiration, and of an understanding that the gift was just one step in the courtship process. The young man might present the gift during a formal occasion, perhaps after a dance or during a private moment between them where words were not enough. And when the young woman received it, she knew it wasn't just about the item itself. It was about what it represented. It was about the connection between the two of them and the unspoken promise that it carried. For a young woman, receiving a gift was often a delicate affair. It wasn't just about gratitude. It was about how to accept it within the context of societal expectations. A lady couldn't simply accept a gift with too much enthusiasm that might be seen as improper. Instead, she was expected to express her appreciation with grace while maintaining a sense of decorum. It was a careful balancing act, one that was reflected in every aspect of courtship. Everything from the way she danced, to the way she received a letter, to the way she accepted a gift, was scrutinized, evaluated, and interpreted. Her response wasn't just about showing gratitude. It was about demonstrating that she was the right match for the gentleman, that she was worthy of his affection. And as for the young man, the act of giving a gift was just as telling. It wasn't just about the material value of the item. It was about what the gift signified. A gift given at the right moment could speak volumes about a man's intentions. Was he genuinely interested in the young woman? Was he truly invested in the courtship process? Or was he simply following the expected social rituals? The way a gift was given and the timing of that gift were as much about expressing intent as they were about showcasing wealth. What's important to note here is that for both the giver and the receiver, the act of exchanging letters and gifts wasn't just a simple formality. It was part of a larger ritual. It was a way to communicate feelings that were too delicate or too private to be said aloud in public. It was a way to show that despite all the societal pressure, despite the constraints placed on them by family and reputation, they were still human beings with hearts, with desires, and with a longing to connect. And yet, despite the formality of these exchanges, there was always the potential for something more. A letter or a gift could symbolize the beginning of a deeper connection, a quiet promise that beyond the public performance of courtship, there was something real between two people. Love, though constrained by societal rules, still found a way to express itself through the written word, through the thoughtful gesture of a gift, through the silent communication between two people who dared to look beyond the world of family expectations and see each other for who they truly were. Now that we've explored the delicate world of letters and gifts, let's take a moment to talk about something equally important, perhaps even more so when it comes to Regency courtship reputation. In this world, a person's reputation wasn't just a reflection of who they were, it was everything. It shaped how they were perceived, how they were treated, and ultimately whether or not they would be able to navigate the complex system of courtship at all. A person's reputation could open doors or slam them shut, and it was one of the most powerful forces at play in the world of Regency romance. Let me take you back to that ball, to the bustling dance floor filled with the sound of violins and the soft rustling of silk gowns. As you glide through the room, you can feel the weight of all the eyes on you. It's not just your suitor who's watching, it's everyone. Every word you say, every smile you offer, every glance you exchange carries meaning, and that meaning extends far beyond the moment. You might feel like you're in a world of your own, sharing a dance with someone who sparks something deep within you. But the reality is, every move is being watched and evaluated. Every suitor who approaches, every lady who catches your eye, and every gentle tap of your foot on the polished floor is noticed. And behind each glance, there's a question: is she worthy of him? Is he worthy of her? In Regency England, reputation was the most fragile thing you could possess. For women particularly, it was the one thing that could either open or close doors to a happy future. Your reputation wasn't just about what you did in the privacy of your home, it was about how society saw you. One misstep could ruin everything. A woman's reputation was tied not just to her own actions, but to the actions of her family. If a scandal broke even a small one, it was not easily swept aside. Gossip could spread quickly, and before long her name might be tarnished beyond repair. It wasn't just about what was true, it was about what people believed. And society, with its rigid rules and relentless judgment, was quick to judge. Now let's shift to the other side, the young men of the period. Men too had reputations to uphold, though their reputations were often viewed with a bit more leniency than women's. Still, the pressure was there. A man's reputation wasn't just about his personal conduct, it was about the actions of his family, his ability to provide for a wife, and his status in society. A young man of good reputation was someone who had made his way through society with honor and respectability. He could be the best of men, charming and respectful, but even one poor decision, an unsavory connection, an ill-timed romantic affair could sully his name. In the world of Regency courtship, where reputation was paramount, even the smallest slip could make someone undesirable in the eyes of a potential suitor's family. So what happens when the very thing that keeps the courtship wheels turning, reputation, becomes threatened by scandal? The consequences could be severe. A reputation that was carefully built over years could be destroyed in an instant. Scandal, after all, wasn't just an isolated event. It was a chain reaction, a ripple that spread far beyond the individuals involved. Let's look at the dynamics of scandal for a moment, shall we? Imagine for a moment that a rumor begins to spread. Perhaps it's a whispered tale about a young woman's interaction with a man, one that was entirely innocent, but one that, when seen through the lens of social judgment, could be misinterpreted. The next thing you know, the rumor is out, and the young woman's reputation is called into question. She hasn't done anything wrong, she hasn't broken any rules, but the mere implication of scandal is enough to tarnish her future. A single misstep, even if misunderstood, can leave a lasting mark on a person's reputation. And once that mark is made, it's incredibly difficult to erase. Her chances of securing a good match, of marrying into the family that could offer her financial stability, of continuing the family legacy, all of that is now in jeopardy. A woman's future could very well depend on how society judged her actions, even if those actions were purely innocent. For a young man, a scandal might not ruin his future quite as quickly, but it could still have serious consequences. His family might disapprove, other suitors might become wary, and his standing in the eyes of potential matches could be significantly diminished. A young man's reputation might not be as fragile as a woman's, but it was still crucial to his prospects in courtship. And a man whose reputation was tainted by scandal was a man whose chances at a successful match were drastically reduced. Think about the weight of all of this. If you were a young woman navigating the world of courtship during Regency England, your entire future would be on the line, not just in the dance, not just in your conversations with suitors, but in your actions, in the way you carried yourself, in how others saw you. There was no room for error. Your reputation, which you may have worked years to build, could be lost in a single day if someone decided to spread the wrong rumor. It could be a harmless interaction that was blown out of proportion, or it could be something more severe. A woman could be judged for something as small as walking with a man in the park without a chaperone, or for being seen with the wrong suitor at the wrong time. The impact of scandal extended far beyond the individuals involved. Families were affected. A young woman's family could face public shame if her reputation was questioned. If a suitor's family found out that a potential match had been involved in a scandal, they might call off the engagement, or worse, refuse to entertain the match altogether. Imagine being the mother of a young woman involved in a rumor or scandal. What would you do? How would you protect her future when the very thing that was supposed to be her foundation, her reputation, was under attack? The social fallout could ripple across the entire family, potentially ruining a family's social standing and closing doors for generations. That's why in Regency England, family involvement in courtship wasn't just about making sure the match was right, it was about safeguarding reputation. Every action, every word spoken, every glance exchanged was scrutinized for good or ill. And it wasn't just the family's reputation that mattered, it was the entire community's judgment that was on the line. The fear of scandal was pervasive. It wasn't just about doing something wrong, it was about being seen doing something wrong. And once that perception took root, it could stick with you forever. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite all of this, despite the immense pressure placed on reputation, there were moments of rebellion, moments when people pushed against the boundaries set by society. Even in the face of scandal, love could still find a way. A whispered conversation at a ball, a fleeting touch during a dance, a stolen glance across the room. These small acts of defiance, while not often seen by the public eye, could carry great meaning for the people involved. And in the midst of all the pressure, all the rules, love found a way to emerge. In this world of rigid expectations where scandal loomed like a shadow over every potential match, love was still a force that couldn't be entirely contained. Despite the constant judgment, despite the weight of reputation, there were moments when people were able to break free from societal constraints. A young man might find a way to secretly communicate his feelings to the young woman he admired, perhaps through a carefully chosen gift or a quiet note passed in secret. A young woman might, in the midst of a carefully managed social event, allow herself a brief moment of connection, an exchange of looks that spoke volumes about her true feelings. And perhaps, just perhaps, in the shadows of the ballroom, in the quiet corners of the garden, love could bloom against the odds and despite the scrutiny. So as we reflect on the role of reputation and scandal in this world, we begin to see that courtship in Regency England was not just a matter of hearts and minds. It was a performance played out on a public stage where every move, every gesture, every word was laden with meaning. Reputation for both men and women was the backdrop against which courtship unfolded. It wasn't just about finding a partner, it was about doing so while navigating the tightrope of social expectations and family reputation. And in this world where a single misstep could shatter everything, love had to find a way to slip through the cracks. As we continue exploring the intricacies of courtship in Regency England, it's impossible to ignore the undeniable role that family played in the process. In many ways, family approval was everything. In a world where reputation was everything, your marriage wasn't just a union between two individuals, it was an alliance between two families. The connection between these families was crucial as it affected not only the future of the young couple, but also the social status of everyone involved. Imagine being a young woman raised in a noble family where every action, every decision, and every word you spoke was carefully observed. You've been taught from a young age that your marriage will be one of the most important decisions you make, not because of personal affection, but because it will impact your family's future. In Regency society, this wasn't just a matter of finding a man you loved. It was about finding someone your family could approve of, someone whose social standing and wealth could enhance your family's legacy. It's not that love didn't matter, it did. But it was secondary to the approval of your family, your father in particular. The father played a significant role in the courtship process. A father's approval or lack thereof could make or break the entire courtship. Your father was not only the head of the household, but also the head of your future. It wasn't enough for you to be attracted to someone or even to love them. You had to ensure that the man you chose to marry was a worthy match in your father's eyes. He wasn't just evaluating the suitor's character, but also his lineage, his wealth, his ability to provide for you, and his potential to uphold the family name. The choice of who you married was seen as a reflection of your family's ability to manage its affairs, its social standing, and its future. But let's not make the mistake of thinking that this was a one-sided decision. While the father had the final say, the mother played a critical role in this process too. The mother, often more attuned to her daughter's personal desires, had the task of balancing the young woman's wishes with the social realities of the time. A mother might be more sympathetic to her daughter's romantic feelings, but she too had to navigate the constraints placed on her by society. Even if the daughter was head over heels in love with a particular suitor, it was the mother who might have to remind her of the importance of social status and family alliances. While the father was concerned with wealth, power, and legacy, the mother had a more intimate understanding of her daughter's emotional well-being. But in the end, even the most loving mother could not completely disregard the broader societal expectations. Marriage wasn't simply about happiness, it was about social survival. And the mother, much like the father, had to ensure that any match made was one that kept the family's name intact. Now think about the pressures on the young man in this situation. For him, courting a young woman of noble birth wasn't simply about his own desires, it was about proving himself to her family. He had to demonstrate that he was worthy of her, not just in terms of personal attraction, but in terms of his ability to carry on his family's name, provide for her, and enhance her family's social standing. A suitor's family had to be able to meet certain standards: wealth, land, influence. Even if a young man loved the lady with all his heart, the approval of her family was the only thing that mattered in the end. A suitor couldn't approach the young woman without first gaining her family's approval. He couldn't act on his feelings without securing their blessing. Courtship wasn't something you did alone. It was a process that involved both families, their reputations, and their interests. Let's pause for a moment and consider just how much power families had in determining the course of courtship. Picture a scenario where a young woman meets a charming young man at a ball. They exchange smiles, they dance, and a spark of affection begins to form. But what happens next? Does the young woman get to decide if they should pursue a relationship? Not entirely. Her family, and especially her father, must approve of the match. The young man might have the best of intentions, and the young woman might feel an undeniable connection, but if her father deems him unworthy, perhaps because of his family's lack of wealth or a questionable reputation, then the courtship is effectively over before it has even begun. The young woman, no matter how much she might desire him, has no choice but to fall in line with her father's decision. Love, it seems, had very little to do with it. And what about the young man? The family of the woman he desires is just as important as his own. If his family doesn't hold the right title, if they aren't wealthy enough, if they're of lower social rank, it could damage his chances of securing a match with her. Imagine a young man who truly loves a young woman, but his family is less socially established or doesn't have the wealth to match her family's expectations. The social world of Regency England doesn't leave room for such discrepancies. Even the most sincere love could be swept aside in the name of status and wealth. In this world, everything was contingent on social rank and reputation. For the families involved, these decisions were not taken lightly. Marriages in the Regency period were not simply about personal connection, they were about survival, about maintaining or improving the family's social standing. The young woman's marriage was a reflection of her family's ability to secure its future, while the young man's choice of a wife was an opportunity to align his family with a respected name. As you can imagine, courtship was more like a business negotiation than a romantic engagement. The decision-making process was filled with calculations, not just about love, but about the family's wealth, reputation, and future prospects. And so the question arises, how much room did love really have in this process? Was there space for personal connection, for mutual affection, in a world so heavily governed by family interests and societal expectations? The answer in many ways lies in the subtle interactions that occurred behind closed doors. While the public events, the balls, the promenades, the dinner parties were all carefully regulated and controlled, there were moments where the two people involved could communicate more freely outside the watchful eyes of their families. These were the moments when the real feelings could be expressed, the moments where a suitor could send a letter or present a gift as a sign of his affection. But even these actions were not free from scrutiny. Letters had to be carefully worded, gifts had to be appropriate, and expressions of affection had to be measured. A misstep in any of these areas could damage the courtship and, worse, ruin the reputations of both families involved. At the heart of all of this, though, was one key truth: family approval was essential. A match was never truly made until both families, particularly the parents, had given their blessing. If one family rejected the suitor, or if the suitor was deemed unsuitable for any reason, the courtship would be halted before it could even develop into something more. The idea of making a romantic choice independent of familial input simply didn't exist. Family approval was the foundation upon which everything rested. In this world, love wasn't the driving force, it was the family's seal of approval that truly determined the future of the relationship. But perhaps there's a certain romanticism in this, isn't there? Despite the rigid structure, despite the immense pressures and social expectations, there were moments when love, quietly and against the odds, found a way to break through. Even in a world where the family's approval mattered most, love still managed to find its way into the hearts of young men and women. A glance exchanged in the ballroom, a whispered word during a dance, a letter sent under the cover of darkness. These were the small acts that allowed love to survive even in a world of social regulation. When we look back at Regency courtship, we see not just a world of rules and expectations, but a world where love had to fight for its place, where it had to navigate the complex web of family reputation and social standing. Yet despite it all, love still managed to find its voice, its way into the lives of young men and women, however quietly and subtly it emerged. As we step into the more intimate and formal phases of Regency courtship, we find ourselves at the threshold of what was perhaps the most pivotal moment in a young person's life: engagement and marriage. These weren't just personal milestones or emotional moments, but events of profound social significance. In Regency England, engagements and marriages were not merely about love, they were about alliances, wealth, social standing, and family reputation. These events were the culmination of years of social maneuvering, careful observation, and often much more than personal affection. They were contracts that bound families as much as individuals, and the weight of these unions went far beyond the romantic ideals we often associate with marriage today. Let's imagine for a moment that you are a young woman in Regency England, and you've been courting a gentleman for some time. You've danced together at balls, exchanged letters, perhaps even shared a few quiet moments during the promenades in the garden. The connection between you is clear, but now the time has come for the formalities. He has asked for your hand in marriage, and the engagement begins to unfold. For you, this moment should be a thrilling one, a dream come true. But beneath that excitement lies the weight of what this engagement truly means. It's not just about your personal feelings, but about the future, about your family's legacy, and about securing the position you'll occupy in society. The engagement itself, though a joyful time, was laden with pressures. It wasn't just about you and your suitor. It was a moment for both families to come together to assess the match and to ensure that everything had been arranged to protect their respective interests. This wasn't a decision made lightly. It was a public declaration of intention, and the scrutiny was immense. Every detail of the engagement was carefully considered: where the announcement was made, who attended, how the engagement was announced to society. The engagement marked the start of a period where love could begin to blossom in the shadow of familial expectations, but even then, love was often secondary to the match's social and economic advantages. But what did engagement actually mean in this context? When a couple was engaged, it wasn't a private commitment made between two people in love. It was an agreement, a contract that signified a deeper connection. The young man had made his intentions clear, but more importantly, he had earned his family's approval to enter this next stage of courtship. The young woman, too, had to obtain her family's approval. Often it wasn't just her father who had the say. It was her mother, her uncles, her aunts, and sometimes even distant relatives who weighed in on whether this was the right match for her. The marriage, after all, wasn't just about two individuals coming together. It was about uniting families, securing the family name, and ensuring that the future was secured both financially and socially. The engagement was an opportunity for the couple to demonstrate that they were suitable for each other, not just in terms of love and attraction, but in terms of shared values, family connections, and societal expectations. It was a time for the families to openly examine the match, to ask questions, to discuss the suitor's family background, his wealth, and his prospects. This was no simple matter. In Regency England, the right match could elevate a family's status. The wrong one could destroy it. In the eyes of society, a marriage wasn't just about compatibility. It was about ensuring the future, preserving wealth, and securing the right place in the social order. For a young man in this world, the engagement was also a significant moment of scrutiny. Not only did he have to prove himself worthy of the young lady's affections, but he also had to demonstrate his worth to her family, his wealth, his lineage, his character. All of these things would be under intense scrutiny. Had he made his fortune honestly? Was his family's reputation intact? Did he have the social standing to marry into her family? In Regency England, there was no room for impulsive decisions. A suitor was not just a young man in love, he was an investment, and his value was tied to his ability to contribute to the family's status. The engagement was a formal way of showing that the young man had passed the test, that he had earned the right to be considered a suitable match. As the engagement progressed, the couple would move closer to the eventual marriage. But the road from engagement to marriage was not always as straightforward as we might think. The engagement was a public event, but it was also a time for both families to prepare for the future. The families of both the bride and the groom would work together to make arrangements for the wedding, deciding on the date, location, guest list, and perhaps most importantly, the terms of the marriage settlement. This settlement, a legally binding contract, often determined the financial terms of the marriage. It was a way of ensuring that the bride's family would be financially secure after the wedding, and it helped define the roles, responsibilities, and expectations for the couple moving forward. Imagine then, as a young woman, what it felt like to move through this engagement period. You were no longer just a debutante looking for a match, you were an engaged woman about to be married. But what does that mean in a world where your every action is scrutinized? It means that you're not just preparing for the wedding, you're preparing for a new role, a new identity. You are about to become part of a family, your new husband's family, and you must be prepared to uphold that family's name, its traditions, and its social standing. The pressure to marry well, to marry strategically, was immense. This wasn't just a decision you made for yourself, it was a decision that would affect your family's future, and possibly the future of your children. Your marriage wasn't just about love, it was about survival, about positioning yourself within the complex social structures that governed Regency England. For the man, the engagement meant that he had passed the initial hurdles of courtship. He had proven himself worthy of the lady's hand, but now the hard work truly began. The engagement was the first step toward the rest of his life. The pressure was on to ensure that he could provide for her and their future family, to prove that he was capable of living up to the promises made during the engagement. The wedding, after all, was not just about the couple. It was about the families, about their status, and about their place in society. When the wedding day finally arrived, it marked the official union of two families, two social standings, and two futures. The ceremony itself was a public spectacle, an event that was witnessed by family, friends, and society. The wedding wasn't just about love. It was about securing the future, preserving the family's honor, and cementing the couple's place in the social hierarchy. The bride, dressed in the finest gown, walked down the aisle surrounded by the watchful eyes of her family and community. The groom, equally adorned in the best attire, stood at the altar with a mixture of nervous excitement and solemn responsibility. But beneath all the formalities, beneath the grand spectacle, there was something more. The marriage itself was a moment of personal connection. It was the culmination of the courtship process, the formal declaration of love and commitment. And while the pressures of society were always present, there was a space in that moment, however fleeting, for something more personal, more intimate. Despite the weight of family expectations and societal scrutiny, love had its place in the union. The quiet exchange of vows, the soft promise of a future together, held deep significance for both parties. Even after the wedding, the newly married couple found themselves navigating the complex world of Regency society, where their every move continued to be watched, judged, and measured. The marriage wasn't just the beginning of a new chapter, it was the continuation of the social performance. They would attend events together, have children, and over time build a life that was as much about maintaining social order and reputation as it was about fostering love. Yet despite all the formalities, the courtship and marriage process in Regency England left room for real connection, for deep affection, and even for love to grow. While the system was far from perfect, and while the pressures placed on young men and women were immense, there were still moments when genuine affection, understanding, and even passion could break through the layers of societal expectation. Love, it seemed, wasn't something that could easily be contained or controlled. Even in a world built on rules, regulations, and the constant dance of social expectation, love still found its way. In the world of Regency courtship, one thing became immediately clear: the art of communication was far more than just talking. It was the thread that wove together every interaction, every exchange, every glance, and every moment between suitor and lady. In a society where emotions had to be concealed, where affections were expressed in the most subtle and indirect of ways, the way in which people communicated both verbally and non-verbally became the ultimate form of courtship. It wasn't just about what was said, it was about how it was said, when it was said, and often the things that went unsaid. Imagine, if you will, stepping into a crowded ballroom at a grand event. The music flows softly, the sound of violins and gentle piano chords setting the mood. But the real symphony here is in the dance of courtship. Here, every young lady and suitor is not only moving to the rhythm of the music, but to the invisible rhythm of society's expectations. A quick glance across the room, a subtle tilt of the head, the way a gentleman bows. These are the silent forms of communication that hold more weight than any words spoken. Regency courtship wasn't about loud declarations or spontaneous gestures. No, it was about restraint. It was about communication that was composed, measured, and delicate. For the young woman standing in that ballroom the entire evening is a delicate balance between personal desire and the social expectation to maintain composure. Every step, every word spoken, every gesture made is laden with meaning. The act of eye contact, for example, might seem trivial to us, but in this world it was anything but. In fact, the moment when a gentleman meets a lady's eyes across the crowded ballroom was not just a fleeting moment of connection, it was a form of courtship. In that brief glance, an entire world of emotions, intentions, and promises could be exchanged. The young woman might lower her eyes modestly, signaling interest, or she might turn her gaze away, showing disinterest. Every glance was intentional, even when it was subtle. Every gaze exchanged communicated something, whether it was an invitation, a silent acknowledgement, or a fleeting connection. And it wasn't just eye contact that communicated. In the world of Regency courtship, even how one walked had its own unspoken language. A lady's carriage, the way she moved through a room, spoke volumes about her poise, her education, her level of grace. A gentleman, too, had to be aware of his movements. The way he approached a lady, the distance he kept while dancing, how he stood beside her. All of these were forms of communication that demonstrated his intentions. A gentleman couldn't just walk up to a lady and make his interest known in a direct way. He had to be careful, measured, even deliberate in his actions. The way he extended his hand for a dance, the way he bowed, the way he presented himself. All of these spoke to his interest in her, his respect for her, and his readiness to pursue a match within the bounds of propriety. But what about words? Surely words played a part in courtship as well. Absolutely. But here's the trick. Words were used with caution. Every sentence, every phrase, every compliment was crafted carefully. A gentleman didn't simply express his admiration for a lady in the same way we might today. Compliments had to be veiled in politeness, respect, and decorum. Too much directness, too much enthusiasm, and a suitor could quickly become overbearing or worse, seen as improper. If he praised her beauty too openly, he could be judged as insincere or even overly forward. If he spoke too much about his feelings, he risked making her and her family uncomfortable. Instead, a suitor's words were meant to convey his interest, but they had to do so subtly, almost poetically. Compliments weren't just about looks, they were about character, grace, and virtue. A lady's beauty might be remarked upon, but so might her intelligence, her kindness, or the elegance of her manners. A gentleman might say something like, "Your poise in the waltz is matched only by the grace of your character," or, "It is rare to meet someone with both such beauty and intelligence." These weren't just compliments, they were assessments of her suitability as a partner wrapped in elegant language. The words spoke not only to her beauty, but to her worth as a match, as a future partner in a socially and financially strategic union. But the beauty of Regency courtship wasn't just in the spoken words, it was in the unspoken ones. The moments of silence between a suitor and a lady could be just as telling as any conversation. The courtship process was about learning how to communicate with restraint. For a young woman, this meant maintaining a certain distance both physically and emotionally from the man she might be courting. She was expected to be demure, to hold herself with a sense of decorum, and to allow the man to lead the conversation, the dance, and ultimately the relationship. She could show interest through small gestures, perhaps the slight movement of her fan or a delicate shift of her gaze. But she couldn't make the first move. She couldn't say, "I like you," or "I'm interested." Instead, her silence would do the talking. Her reactions to the gentleman's words and actions were what revealed her feelings. For the suitor, silence also played an important role. He wasn't supposed to rush in with declarations of love or promises of devotion. Instead, he would wait for the lady to respond, to show in her gestures, her words, and her actions whether or not she was interested in moving forward. He might show her small gestures of affection, perhaps presenting her with a flower or sending her a book of poetry. But the most important form of communication came through the restraint he showed. A suitor had to maintain a certain distance, and it was through this distance that his feelings were communicated. It was in the pauses between words, in the spaces between gestures, that a suitor's true intentions were made clear. Now let's shift our focus a bit and talk about the role of letters in this highly regulated form of communication. Letters were not just notes passed back and forth between suitors. They were a formal part of the courtship process. A gentleman's letter to a lady was an opportunity for him to express his feelings in a way that the constraints of face-to-face conversation didn't always allow. It was a form of communication that allowed for deeper, more personal expressions of affection. But even here, everything had to be measured. The tone of the letter, the language used, the level of affection, it all had to be carefully considered. In Regency courtship, a letter could be the beginning of something truly meaningful, or it could be the end of the courtship altogether. If a gentleman's letter was too forward, too emotional, or too personal, it could ruin his chances with the young lady. If it was too impersonal, too reserved, it might give the impression that he wasn't serious, that he wasn't fully invested in the courtship. The key was finding the right balance. A well-written letter conveyed respect, admiration, and interest, but it never crossed the line into excessive familiarity. For a young woman, receiving a letter was a momentous occasion. It was an expression of interest that could reveal much about the gentleman's character, his intentions, and his understanding of the courtship process. The lady's response, too, was highly significant. Her tone and her language would reveal not just her feelings, but her family's approval of the match. And then there were gifts, those physical tokens that often accompanied a suitor's affections. A gift wasn't just a material item. It was a form of communication. A gentleman might present a lady with a small token, perhaps a handkerchief, a flower, or a locket. But these gifts weren't given casually. They were messages, symbols of the suitor's feelings, and each item had a meaning. A rose might symbolize love, a lily might signify purity, and a locket might be a symbol of the suitor's desire to keep the lady close to his heart. Even in the exchange of gifts, there was a certain code to follow too much, and it would seem too forward, too little, and the lady might wonder about his true feelings. A gift was an act of communication, a way to express what words couldn't fully convey. So what does all of this say about courtship in Regency England? It says that communication in this world was subtle, intricate, and highly structured. It wasn't just about what was spoken aloud, but about every unspoken gesture, every carefully crafted word, and every silent glance. The way a gentleman looked at a lady, the way she responded, the letters they exchanged, and the gifts they gave, each of these was part of the language of courtship. Even in a world where emotions were often hidden beneath layers of propriety, love still found a way to communicate itself. But it communicated through subtlety, through silence, and through the art of restraint. It was a world where what was not said could speak just as loudly as what was spoken, and where the unspoken moments held just as much meaning as the words on paper or the polite conversation at the ball. In the world of Regency courtship, where emotions were often masked by societal expectations and family pressures, communication was everything. It was the bridge that connected hearts, the quiet understanding that passed between two people who knew that love, though complicated, could still find its way through the smallest gestures and the most carefully crafted words. And in a world so bound by rules, it was the art of communication that allowed love to bloom, even if only in the quiet, delicate spaces between words. As we've navigated the intricacies of courtship so far through the glances shared across crowded ballrooms, the polite dances, the exchanged letters, we've witnessed how rigid societal structures governed the way young men and women interacted. But while courtship in Regency England was about more than just romantic feelings, it also had an undeniable physical dimension, a component that was just as regulated and significant as the words spoken or the dances performed. Physical interaction in courtship wasn't just about closeness or affection, it was a reflection of societal codes, a silent language of its own, laden with meaning, subtext, and deep layers of propriety. Imagine for a moment that you're standing in the midst of one of these grand balls. The room is alive with music and conversation, the soft glint of candlelight reflecting off the elegant gowns and sharp waistcoats of the evening's attendees. All around you, young men and women are preparing for their next dance, exchanging glances, holding brief conversations, perhaps sharing a quiet smile. And then a gentleman approaches you. The moment he steps forward, your heart skips a beat, not from the excitement of romantic affection, but from the weight of social expectation. The gesture of inviting a lady to dance in Regency England was not as simple as asking for a turn on the floor. It was a statement, a form of communication, a calculated move within the world of courtship. The suitor had to not only assess his own feelings but also carefully measure the reaction of his lady, considering her family's status, her social standing, and her personal feelings always within the public gaze. So as you accept the invitation to dance, you step onto the floor. But even then, as you feel your partner's hand gently resting on your waist, you both know that this moment is far more than just an opportunity to showcase your dancing skills. The waltz, after all, wasn't merely an elegant display of movement. It was a test, a trial of sorts, where every move was scrutinized not just by the couple involved, but by society itself. The physical closeness of the waltz, one of the most intimate dances of the time, was both a privilege and a risk. Your hands delicately placed on each other, your bodies closer than in other dances, all of this signaled a closeness that, though controlled and restrained, could still suggest something deeper. This wasn't just about following the rhythm. It was about how your bodies interacted, how the gentleman led and the lady followed, how the dance itself became a form of silent communication. A gentleman could not just guide a lady around the floor recklessly or with too much familiarity. His touch had to be firm yet respectful, a balance of control and restraint. A firm grip might suggest possession or dominance, while a loose one might imply disinterest or a lack of confidence. The balance of pressure, the distance maintained between the two dancers, conveyed as much as the movements themselves. The lady, for her part, had to be equally careful. She could not allow her emotions to show too openly. She could not lean in too closely or show any signs of eagerness. She had to remain poised, graceful, and composed no matter how strongly she might feel in that moment. In this way, the dance was more than just a display of physical skill. It was a performance of emotional restraint, an expression of one's status and understanding of the courtship rules. The way the couple moved together communicated much about the potential of the relationship, and often the spectators, the chaperones, the family members watched closely, evaluating every step, every gesture. If the couple danced too closely, it could be interpreted as a sign of familiarity that was unacceptable. If they seemed too distant, it might signal indifference, a lack of romantic interest. Even the smallest physical cues, an accidental brush of the hand, a too prolonged touch, were moments charged with significance. In Regency society, these interactions were never just incidental. They were full of meaning and potential consequences. Yet the waltz wasn't the only moment in which physical interaction held importance. The promenade, the garden walks, the quiet moments at the edge of the ballroom. These were all spaces where physical touch, though often constrained by social rules, was still part of the courtship. In these more private settings, the rules weren't as rigid as they were on the dance floor, but they were still ever present. A walk in the garden with a suitor might offer a moment of respite from the public eye, but it was still monitored. The chaperone was always nearby, often close enough to maintain propriety, but distant enough to give the young couple a false sense of privacy. Here, a gentleman might offer his arm, and a lady might rest her hand lightly on his sleeve. It wasn't an overtly intimate gesture, but it was one of the few moments where some physical closeness could be exhibited. However, there were rules even for such modest gestures. A hand resting lightly on an arm was acceptable, but anything beyond that was considered improper. For a lady, there was always the question of how to navigate these interactions. How much physical contact was too much? How could she show interest without appearing forward? The fine line between interest and impropriety was one that she had to walk with care. A suitor might offer his arm, but should she take it? A slight touch of the hand, a gentle resting of her fingers on his sleeve. Those were the gestures that showed mutual respect and interest, but only within the boundaries of propriety. If she allowed herself to be too forward, too familiar, she would risk being judged harshly by society. On the other hand, if she remained too aloof, if she denied him even these small gestures of connection, she might be seen as uninterested or worse, cold and unapproachable. What about the suitor? How did he navigate the delicate art of physical interaction? For him, the rules were just as clear, though they were often more focused on his conduct as a gentleman. He had to make sure his actions were appropriate at all times, never too forward, never too distant. A suitor could offer his arm, could guide her gently through the garden or across the ballroom, but that was where the line was drawn. Physical gestures had to be subtle. A gentleman might gently guide a lady's hand onto his arm, but he would never pull her too close or be too casual in his touch. His actions had to communicate interest but also respect. And then, of course, there were the gifts, the material tokens that conveyed affection. A suitor could not simply buy a lady any gift he wished. It had to be appropriate for the stage of the relationship. An overly lavish gift might be seen as excessive or too forward, while a too simple token could convey indifference. The giving of a gift was another form of physical interaction that carried weight. A simple bouquet of flowers, each bloom with its own meaning, could carry a message of love, affection, or admiration, but it was always tied to the rules of courtship. A locket, a small piece of jewelry, a handwritten letter sealed with care, each of these was a physical manifestation of a suitor's feelings. But even here, the gift had to be presented in the proper context. A gift given at the wrong time or in the wrong way could be misinterpreted, and a suitor who didn't understand the subtlety of the exchange could quickly ruin his chances of winning the lady's heart. The significance of touch, however small, was profound. In a society where everything was carefully monitored, a touch was one of the few ways that true feelings could be communicated. A gentle touch on the hand could convey interest, while a firm grip could indicate dominance or even possessiveness. Even in the restrained world of Regency courtship, touch was still a powerful form of expression. But this power was never fully realized unless it was used with caution, respect, and an understanding of the rules that governed it. Consider the tension between the desire for physical closeness and the boundaries that society imposed. There was always the question of how far a couple could go, how much touch could be exchanged before it became scandalous. For a young woman, this was perhaps the most difficult part of courtship, understanding how to navigate her own feelings while adhering to the rules. She might want to reach for his hand, to lean in a little closer during a dance, to share a fleeting moment of touch that would speak more loudly than any words could, but she couldn't. She had to remain composed, graceful, and poised. For the gentleman, the challenge was equally complicated. He had to show affection, but he could not do so too overtly. He had to gauge the lady's interest, measure her reactions, and move carefully within the framework of propriety. He could not take liberties, no matter how strongly he might feel. Courtship was a subtle game of give and take, of restraint and expression, and the physical interaction, however small, was the most delicate part of the process. Even in a world that demanded so much restraint, there were moments where love could break free. A brief touch, a smile that lingered just a moment too long, a glance across the room that said everything. These were the moments when physical affection found its voice. In a society that stifled affection through rules and regulations, it was in these subtle, fleeting moments of physical interaction that love had its chance to emerge. A soft touch on the hand, a shared laugh, the closeness of the dance, these moments, though fleeting, spoke more loudly than words ever could. And while the world around them might have been carefully regulated, love in all its quiet forms still found a way to slip through the cracks. At long last, after the dances, the letters, the careful dances of gestures and silence, we arrive at the ultimate moment, the wedding. But for many in Regency England, this wasn't just a day of celebration or a romantic declaration of love. It was a carefully orchestrated event, a social milestone that brought with it the full weight of public scrutiny and expectation. Marriage in this period wasn't simply the culmination of a romantic relationship. It was a social contract, an arrangement between families, a merging of assets, and often a symbol of status. The notion of love as the primary motivation for marriage, as we might think of it today, was secondary at best. The reality was that marriages were not just about two people coming together. It was about ensuring social standing, securing wealth, and fulfilling societal expectations. Imagine for a moment that you are the young woman about to be married. The excitement is palpable, yes, but beneath that excitement lies the knowledge that this event isn't just about you. It's about your family, your future, and the legacy you are about to build. Your marriage is not just a union between you and your chosen partner. It is the formalization of a connection that will affect your family's position in society for generations to come. The societal expectations that govern your life as a young woman have all led to this moment. You've danced, exchanged letters, received gifts, and followed all the steps of Regency courtship. But now that the engagement has been formalized, the marriage itself is the final public acknowledgement of everything that has been carefully arranged. It is not just a personal event. It is an event for the entire community to witness, to discuss, and to judge. In Regency England, marriage was viewed through the lens of social expectations. It was not just about romantic compatibility or personal affection. It was a contract that brought with it specific duties and responsibilities. For a young woman, marriage meant that she was no longer the daughter of her family, but the wife of her husband, and her role now extended beyond the domestic sphere into the management of her household, her social status, and the continuation of the family name. It wasn't just about love, it was about security status and survival within the rigid confines of the social structure. The wedding itself was often a grand affair. The location was important, typically a church where society could bear witness to the union, and the ceremony was always conducted with the utmost formality. For the young woman, the wedding day was a day to shine, but it was also a day when the expectations of society were most heavily felt. She would wear her finest gown, perhaps a white dress symbolizing purity and virtue, as well as a veil, a sign of her transition from daughter to wife. Her family would be present, of course, but so would the broader community, friends, distant relatives, and social acquaintances, all gathered to witness the occasion. For many families, this event was a chance to publicly announce the merging of wealth and status, to showcase the success of the courtship process, and to demonstrate that their social standing was intact. The groom, for his part, had his own set of expectations to fulfill. He wasn't just marrying for love, he was marrying to secure the future of both families. His role was to ensure that the marriage was socially appropriate, financially advantageous, and aligned with the expectations of both families. A young man's marriage was a reflection of his ability to meet societal standards of responsibility, wealth, and social influence. It was an event that showcased his position in society, his ability to provide, and his potential as a leader within his household. But what of the love between the couple? Could it truly blossom under such heavy expectations? It's certainly true that the public wedding, filled with formality, pomp, and circumstance, often left little room for the expression of personal affection. The ceremony was a performance, a public one, where the focus was as much on the families involved as it was on the couple themselves. But beyond the ceremony, after the guests had gone and the public attention had shifted, the true nature of the marriage began to unfold. Here in the privacy of their new life together, the young couple could begin to explore the depth of their connection to build a partnership that, while still influenced by societal expectations, could also be defined by mutual respect, affection, and shared goals. However, the expectations didn't end with the wedding. In Regency England, marriage was the starting point of a lifetime of responsibilities. The bride, now a wife, was expected to uphold the standards of her new household and ensure that her family's reputation remained intact. She was expected to manage the domestic affairs of the home, to raise children if she could, and to continue the social traditions and practices that were expected of women in her class. The husband, on the other hand, was responsible for the financial well-being of the family, for maintaining their property, and for representing the family's interests in the broader social and political spheres. For both the husband and wife, marriage was a journey defined by societal norms, but it was also a space where the personal and the public intersected. While the external pressures of society dictated much of what they did and how they behaved, the home was a place where the couple could find their footing together, where they could begin to navigate their relationship away from the watchful eyes of family and society. The first years of marriage were often spent adjusting to this new dynamic, finding a balance between personal desires and social obligations, between romantic affection and the realities of married life. For a woman, this meant assuming a role that was both private and public. In the home, she might take on the duties of managing the household, overseeing servants, ensuring that the household ran smoothly. But outside of the home, she was still a reflection of her husband's social standing, and her actions were scrutinized by society. The way she dressed, the way she conducted herself, and the way she interacted with others, all of these things were reflective of her family's status and reputation. Even in marriage, she had to maintain her position within the social hierarchy. There was little room for personal freedom in this regard. Her role was defined by societal expectations, and her identity was still closely tied to her husband's family name. For the husband, marriage meant a shift in responsibility. He was no longer just a single man with his own interests. He was now the head of a household, and his actions affected the family's reputation and future. The expectations placed on him were immense. He had to maintain the financial stability of the family, make sure the estate was running efficiently, and represent the family's interests at social events. He was expected to be a provider, a protector, and a leader within his home. But even with these heavy responsibilities, his personal desires and feelings could still play a role. The balance between duty and affection, between the pressures of social expectation and personal connection, was a constant negotiation in marriage. In Regency England, marriage wasn't simply about two people coming together, it was about ensuring the stability and success of both families. The union was a social contract, and the wedding was the public declaration of that contract. But it was also an opportunity for the couple to begin their life together, to navigate the challenges of societal expectations, while learning to build a relationship that was uniquely their own. The impact of marriage went far beyond the individual couple, though. Families often saw marriage as a way to increase their social standing, secure wealth, and solidify their power within their social circles. A well-matched marriage could raise the status of a family, increase their wealth, and open doors to greater opportunities. On the other hand, a poorly chosen marriage could ruin a family's reputation, deplete their fortune, and close off potential alliances. The stakes were high, and marriage wasn't just a personal choice. It was a societal decision that impacted generations to come. Yet despite all the pressures, despite the intense societal expectations and rigid rules, there was still room for love to grow. In the quiet moments of shared responsibility and the time spent together away from society's prying eyes, a couple could find true affection. In this world of rules, regulations, and strategic unions, love still found a way to emerge, often in the most unexpected and private of moments. Marriage in Regency England wasn't just the end of courtship, it was the beginning of a new phase, a phase where two individuals bound by duty and expectation could still discover each other as individuals. And while the public face of marriage was dictated by the rules of society, the private reality could be something altogether more personal, more meaningful, and yes, sometimes even more romantic than one might imagine. And so we've journeyed through the world of Regency courtship, a world both grand and restrained, formal and emotional, where every glance, every gesture, and every word was laden with meaning. We've explored the rules that governed how men and women interacted, the expectations that shaped their behavior, and the intricate balance they had to strike between personal feelings and social obligations. But if there's one thing that's become clear through our exploration, it's this: while society tried to control every aspect of courtship, love found a way to shine through. As we've seen, courtship during the Regency period was anything but simple. From the moment a young woman stepped into the ballroom, she wasn't just entering a space for dance and music, she was entering a world filled with expectations, social rules, and family obligations. Every movement she made, every word she spoke, and every dance she shared with a suitor was scrutinized by those around her. She wasn't just representing herself in that moment, she was representing her family, her social standing, and her future. And for the gentleman, it was no different. His courtship wasn't just about his personal interest in a lady, it was about proving himself worthy of her family's approval, demonstrating his ability to provide and securing his place within society. But despite the rigid structure of courtship, there was something beautiful about it, something that spoke to the resilience of human emotion. Behind all the rules, the carefully choreographed dances, and the letters penned with the utmost care, there was an undeniable truth: love in its purest form could still emerge. A stolen glance across the room, a fleeting moment shared during a walk in the garden, a carefully chosen word in a letter. These small acts were the subtle ways that affection found its way into a world where so much of it had to be hidden, measured, and controlled. And of course, we can't overlook the role of family and social expectations in shaping this world of courtship. The families of Regency England weren't merely bystanders in the courtship process. They were active participants, their opinions shaping the matches that were made. The approval of a young woman's father or a suitor's family was paramount. It wasn't just about the individuals involved, it was about securing alliances, strengthening reputations, and ensuring that the marriage was a good match both financially and socially. Love, while not disregarded, was often a secondary concern. For the families, it was about preserving the family name, securing wealth, and ensuring that the social structure remained intact. In this way, courtship was as much about navigating the complex web of family expectations as it was about personal connection. But what happens when love does manage to emerge in such a world? When a suitor and a lady do find their way to one another despite the pressures of family reputation and social standing? The marriage that follows, while still influenced by these same societal expectations, becomes an opportunity for the couple to build a life together to navigate the complexities of Regency society as partners. Marriage, while public, formal, and regulated, could still be a place where love found a home. It was within the walls of marriage, after all, where the true relationship could begin to unfold, where the couple could learn about each other beyond the expectations of their families and society. But despite all the formality, it's important to remember that the world of Regency courtship wasn't devoid of romance. Even within the boundaries of social expectation, the spark of love could still ignite. Yes, it was often hidden behind layers of restraint and propriety, but that didn't mean it wasn't real. Courtship in its own way was an intricate dance of affection and respect. There was a certain poetry to it, the way two people bound by the rules of society could still find a connection, an understanding, and even love. It's a testament to the enduring power of human connection that in a world of rules, love still found its way. And while we've spent much time discussing the structured elements of courtship, let's not forget the deeper, often unspoken elements that made it all work. The emotional resilience required to navigate such a society, the inner strength it took to maintain one's composure in the face of so many expectations, and the subtlety with which people navigated their desires, these were all integral parts of the courtship process. For the young men and women of Regency England, love and courtship were both a social duty and a deeply personal experience. They had to balance their desires with the expectations of their families, their communities, and society at large. Every glance exchanged across a crowded room, every letter written, every dance shared in the ballroom carried with it a weight of meaning that transcended the immediate moment. Courtship was not just about two people coming together, it was about families, reputations, and social roles. But in the midst of all this, love still had the chance to flourish. It wasn't always obvious, it wasn't always easy, but it was there sometimes in the smallest gestures, sometimes in the quietest of moments. And that's what makes the world of Regency courtship so fascinating. It's a world filled with rules, expectations, and societal pressures, but it's also a world where love in all its forms still found a way to emerge. In a time when personal desires had to be carefully measured, when public perception shaped private lives, love was still able to weave its way through the rules and expectations. It didn't always happen the way we might think it should. There were no grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Instead, love was found in the small moments, the quiet exchanges, the subtle touches, and the letters penned with careful consideration. For those of us looking back at this world from our modern perspective, it might seem like a strange and highly controlled way of finding love. But there was something beautiful about it too. There was a depth to the connections formed in this world, a level of respect and understanding that in many ways seems to have been lost in the modern rush of dating and romantic pursuits. The slow, deliberate pace of Regency courtship allowed for a connection to form that was deeply rooted in the values of respect, family, and society. So as we end this journey through Regency courtship, let's take a moment to appreciate the complexity and richness of this world. It wasn't just about love. It was about survival, reputation, and navigating a complex social system. But at its core, courtship was still about human connection, the desire to find someone who understood you, someone who could be your partner in life even amidst the pressure and scrutiny of society. And that's where we find the heart of Regency courtship. Love wasn't always loud, wasn't always obvious, but it was always present, quietly flowing beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered in the most unexpected of places. And isn't that something beautiful to consider? That despite all the rules, the expectations, and the societal pressures, love still found a way to break through. Thank you for walking through the world of Regency courtship with me. It's been a fascinating journey exploring how love and society intertwined, how tradition and personal desire collided, and how in the end love still managed to find its way. It's a reminder that no matter the time or place, love, however subtle, however restrained, will always find a way to speak. So as you reflect on what we've explored today, think about the moments of connection that shape your own life. Whether they are loud or quiet, public or private, those moments, just like in Regency courtship, are what truly define love.